welcome to the studios of Bedford Community Television. My name is Ray Chadwick. I'm chairman of the Bedford Republican Committee. Our committee is hosting a series of interview shows with the candidates who will be presenting themselves for your vote in the primary election on September 14th, and the winner, of course, from that in the general election on November 2nd. Now, currently we have two individuals running for state senate in District 9, which includes Bedford, and they are running for the seat which has been held for 26 years by State Senator Sheila Roberge. She's announced that she will be not running again. So of those two individuals on the ballot on September 14th, the Republican ballot that is, we have one of those folks here today with us. We're happy to have Dave Danielson. Dave, how are you doing?
Great, good, thank you
good.
very much for having me today.
So how are you doing? Yeah, are you getting your interview skills all polished up here?
I am. I've been meeting with a lot of business people,
yep.
And trying to learn what the issues that they see are. Yep. And quite frankly, it's been a fascinating thing because I thought I was on top of some of the things, and to learn that there are some things that I wasn't so aware of that are bothering the community. And of course, I think we're going to talk about some of those later on as we go through. But the campaign, I think, is going very well. I mean, to certainly have somebody who served for 26 years like Sheila, Senator Roberge has, and to have her endorsement, and to have the endorsement of Ray Chadwick, who I've admired for a long time, and Maureen Mooney, former Representative Maureen Mooney from Merrimack.
Oh, really?
To have those endorsements this early on it's been encouraging to me to go forward. And the representatives that I've met, the candidates that I've met, have all been encouraging. So I think the campaign is going well.
Well, what exactly convinced you to run for this office? I mean, you've been a town councilor before, but this is now a state level office, and why now? Why you?
Right. The thing that has bothered me, and I'm sure has bothered many people for a while, is the way that the state is going, the direction that the state is headed. I'm a native of New Hampshire, so I've been aware of, appreciated, been a beneficiary of the sound fiscal planning and the sound ways that we've managed our government over time. The last 6 to 8 years I've seen a complete erosion of that government. I've seen an erosion of the trust. I've seen erosion from other states. The appreciation of other states looking at us isn't as strong as it used to be.
Right.
So it's been troubling to me to see that happen, and I felt that I do have some background in municipal government. The way that the tax situation had looked before they repealed some of the work, before they finalized their budget, looked like the towns and cities were going to get hammered with some of those. The pass-throughs is what they were trying to do, push-downs. And I thought that the municipal government's going to be hammered. So my concern is the municipal governments were going to have to respond by raising taxes.
Local taxes.
Right. And I know...
Well, they already have had to do that in the past legislature.
Right. And I know, having been there, I know how hard municipal governments work to try to balance budgets. The reason for that is because they're closer to their constituents.
Yeah.
And so those folks who are in municipal government right now work hard to keep their budgets low. And to have somebody from another government agency push down requirements because they were unable to manage it well just seemed to me to be unfair.
Well, you know, it's particularly a problem when you talk about unfunded requirements. Unfunded mandates is what we talk about. And, you know, that leads me to one of the things I wanted to talk a bit about, because right now there are a variety of states which are joining a lawsuit to stop the latest, what most people call Obamacare. And part of their argument is what it's doing is it's doing two things. I think they would argue that it's taking away the states, infringing on the state's responsibility for regulating health care within the state, and secondly, putting a variety of mandates on the state which are not supported by federal money. So intriguing, because you brought up the topic of now the state doing the same thing to the municipalities. If you were to be, you know, our senator, what would you think the state should be doing about this whole Obamacare thing?
I should start out by saying I haven't read the 2,200-page bill, so I don't.
What?
What? So I don't know that much about Obamacare. However,
well, you're in good company, because I think a large majority of the Congress that passed it didn't read it either.
Right, that's true. But I think the issue that you brought up is a good one, and that is states' rights. And I think We forget what kind of a government we have on a federal basis. We are a republic. That means we are responsible unto ourselves for what we do. It's only those things that we...
You mean we, the state, you're talking about.
It's only those things that the state can't do by itself, should it be giving to the federal government. Now, over time, and I know you don't want this to be a history lesson, but over time, there's been an erosion of those rights. To the point where we seem, as a public, we seem to be very willing to just hand off any of our needs to the federal government. When at the same time we can look at recent events, Katrina being probably the most obvious, is one where the federal government can't respond well. It does not respond well to challenges.
Well, in the case of Katrina, most people don't recognize that there is a hierarchy of response to a disaster, which starts with a local emergency plan, a state emergency plan, and then a federal support. And the federal support is never structured to be there at the onset. It's expected to be there around day 4 for a couple of reasons. It can't get there until it's requested. And secondly, just from a logistics standpoint, when you bring people to a disaster zone, I mean, you're bringing people from around the country that, they're not going to be there the morning after.
Right. And the issue...
But you're right, it does show that you got to rely on your community and your state.
Another, probably in a humorous vein, another anecdote was the snowstorm that struck D.C. this winter, where they got 30 inches of snow, and they had to be out of work for a week. And the comment among many communities, many states was, did anybody notice that they were out of work for a week? But the point of that being, whether it's humorous or looking at the catastrophe that was Katrina, is that the federal government, because of our size now, it's become so unwieldy that the government has to change. It cannot continue. And fortunately, the Constitution has given us that ability to do that on our own. We have the state governments. I've practiced as a regional person. I've been regional planning and regional, New England regional planning. And the opportunities for states to work with each other, cross boundaries, is enormous. The ways to save money, rather than replicating programs into states that don't really need them. We see that benefit if you can focus it on the places where it's needed, not everywhere.
Well, the states are intended, I think, well, I don't know if intended was the right word, but have become opportunities for social experiments. For example, I'll take things like the rationalization of welfare systems, which was actually done in the Congress back in 1994 at a government level or national level. Some of those concepts have been tried in various states as they deal with the problem of people who are unemployed. How do we handle that? How do we handle welfare in general? So I think you're exactly right. I mean, the state's the place where you can do some things, see if they work, and that's, I think, also true in the healthcare environment.
Right, and not to be redundant, to drive that point home, is that there are articles written that identify programs that have been very successful in the federal government. Those programs that have been very successful, have started in the states.
Sure.
And they've been seen by their congressmen or senators who saw the value and brought that into the federal government.
There's a big difference in the state government, which is more akin to your, if you will, family environment, which is it can't print money. So if it doesn't have enough money, enough income to do whatever it thinks it ought to be done, it has to start establishing priorities. And okay, we're going to do these 5 things, and these things we can wait till we have funds. That's not true at the federal level, because back in the backs of their minds is the idea, well, we can print more money, we can borrow more money, we can do these various things that states can't.
Right, and the other thing I think is, and particularly in northern New England states in particular, New England probably in general, is that we're small. 800,000 in Vermont, 1.3 million here. We're small. And so we are much closer to our government than the federal government is to us.
Sure.
And in fact, you'll hear comments that folks who go into Washington are astounded at the lack of knowledge of what's really going on out in the outside the Beltline, it's called. So, and if you're not familiar with it, all you have to do is spend a couple of days there, and you do become somewhat surprised that folks who you think should know have no idea of what people are facing out in the states. So I don't know if I answered
rustic areas.
I don't know if I answered your question specifically, but for sure the states, and that was what the Constitution intended, was for the states to be independent entities, but brought together for the benefit and welfare of the common good.
Common good, yeah, I agree. And I think, but I do see this as a sort of, there's a resurgence of what I'm calling the 10th Amendment revolution, if you will. Right. More and more states are now pushing back at the federal government, because the federal government, and particularly under the current administration of President Obama and the Democrat majorities in the House and the Senate, is reaching into areas that in my opinion, the founders never would have considered. That the federal government, for example, would be taking over the provision of student loans, that it would be buying automobile companies and giving them to unions, which is pretty much what they did, that it would be in the business of insuring mortgages, which we now, through Fannie and Freddie, the taxpayers are now responsible for close to 85% of the mortgages in this country, and if they are unpaid, we have to pay them. So when you look at that whole process, which is actually probably beyond the scope here, but the issue that is in the scope here in a state Senate candidate is, how does this state preserve itself and its integrity and its self-control? And that's why I think this is happening. States are all going, whoa, wait a minute.
I think you're absolutely right. I think this goes back to our initial conversation here, is that I feel, again, having been a native here, I think that's been the attitude of people in New Hampshire since I became aware of a New Hampshire attitude. I really do think, and they push back. I mean, we have this thing called the Governor's Council. That just is, if anybody had to wonder whether or not what we think about government, the Governor's Council is a good indication of what we think about government.
Right.
We're very distrustful of it.
You're talking about the Executive Council.
Yes, the Executive Council. Right. Yeah, not the Town Council.
Yeah.
No, thanks.
No, but the Governor's Council is particularly what it is, but I think the formal name is Executive Council. So for our viewers to know what that was, that's why I mentioned. But I think that's just to the point, though. That is, I don't know if it's unique to this state.
It is,
but it is a very clear indication that they didn't want the governor to become too powerful and to be able to bypass the legislature, implement things, get cronies in, etc. There's the 5-person executive council that approves a lot of what the governor wants or does.
$5,000 and under. Over. $5,000 and over has to be approved.
Has to be done there.
Right. So I think that's an indication. What I wanted to make a point of that is that's an indication, I think, of the way New Hampshire people have always been. And so, again, to come back to our initial conversation, I think over the last 8 years, particularly over the last 8 years, and there could have been an erosion before. I don't want to say it only happened in the last 8 years. But I think over time we've seen more and more have we pushed back and said, well, let the federal government do it. And I think right now people are waking up and saying, because we haven't been asleep that long. I think people are waking up and saying, wait a minute, this has gotten out of hand. This is not the way we do, and we were better off when. Some of the campaign slogans that have come up over the last few years.
I think you're right on the mark. I think I've said this before, is that the voters have woken up to this issue, and the fact that if you put the wrong people in office, pretty soon they'll be, reaching into your pocket in a deeper way, and in this healthcare deal, I see as the opportunity for them to, if the argument is, if the government's going to be paying for your health care, then it has a right to comment on the cost of your health care, and you don't have to move too much further down the road to be talking about regulations, food, diet, etc. I mean, these things are already happening in places like New York City. So you can see where this path is leading, and I think the voters are prepared to reject it. So, but let's lead on to a couple of other things, because no, that's fine. It was a good discussion, but I think one of the things that energizes the voters most is the fiscal profligacy